right? Psalm 53, let's call this one Cleanse Me of This Situation, and a psalm that's going to follow that pattern we mentioned before, meaning the who, the what, and the how are going to be kind of the structure I think this psalm flows along, understanding that in this psalm, the who is actually going to start out in verse 1 as the fool, as we're going to see a psalm that is a lot like Psalm 14, which is super similar to Psalm 53 that we have here, where, like we said, it starts off saying that the fool is the who in this passage, but it's going to go on to say that, of course, what does God do in response? And it says that he is going to look down from heaven to see if there is any who understands, who seeks God, which is going to expand the who out to a more broad cross-section of society, which basically includes everyone at this point. Understand that this is a Psalm of David. It doesn't correspond to any period that I saw in David's life, but understand it does correspond to, as we mentioned in Wednesday night class, a number of periods in Israel's history where the entire society seemed to devolve into something that God just wanted to hit reset on and start over with in the next generation. Understanding that he is going to say, or at least David is going to say in verse 3, that after God looks to see if there's any who seeks after God, his conclusion is this: there is none who does good, not even one. And so beyond those who deny that there is a God, David seems to be describing a situation in which no one is actually doing what is right. Understanding that that is going to lead to the how they respond, and especially how they respond under stress. When in verse 5 it reads, there they are in great terror where there is no terror, reminding me of what Proverbs 28 verse 1 says when it talks about the ways in which the wicked flee when there is no one chasing, but the righteous can be as bold, or it says the righteous are as bold as lions, which makes it seem like Psalm 53 is describing a time in which the wrong that they are doing is producing needless anxiety. Understanding that life provides enough cause for legitimate anxiety, it's even worse when the things that we are doing are piling on additional anxiety that we just don't need in a life that is tough enough. Which may explain how David himself responds at the end of the psalm when he says in verse 6, oh, that salvation for Israel will come out of Zion when God restores the fortunes of his people. Let Jacob rejoice and let Israel be glad. Understanding that there are, once again, situations we can get ourselves into where we can't shake the fear on our own. We have to have the security, the confidence that actually comes from God. Understanding I can put up a great front, but behind it, God can expose the truth. And so in comparison to what we saw in the last chapter where Doeg the Edomite committed wrongs and made him feel more confident, those same wrongs could leave some, if not all of us, feeling shook and anxious in situations where we could otherwise have peace. Why? Because we are in a situation where, in spite of the fact that we're doing wrong, we're in a situation where God is still giving us a chance to turn it around and make better choices. Understanding that the anxiety that can come along with doing wrong is still a good thing, since the confidence that Doeg seemed to have in the last chapter might be an awful lot like the foolish confidence we saw described in chapter 49, understanding that, like we saw in the last chapter, Doeg refusing to set an example was about to become the example. And so my prayer for you is my prayer for me, that much like David prayed at the end of this psalm for God to restore the confidence and beyond that, the rejoicing to his people, that we seek God's help in providing us distance from environments that tempt us to make choices that produce needless anxiety.